right, Mary. So let's talk a little bit about your paper. What do you have here for me?
Okay, so this is the third exercise in the practice document that you suggested for chapter 4.
Okay, so we're talking about responding to what we've summarized, what we've quoted.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So for this one, I chose one of the pieces from the education set.
Okay.
And I picked out some things I wanted to summarize and quote, and then responded to them.
Okay. And so what are you wondering about? If I can pull this over and look at it a little bit. I see you've just tried responding to grading and its discontents. I see on a quick glance, you've got some summary up here, you've got a quote, and what are you wondering?
Well, I have a lot more like summary than quotation in the example or whatever, and I was just wondering, is it like better to use more quotation? Is there a specific like ratio you should have for that? Or
okay, I think that's a really good question. I think a lot of times your summary is probably going to be a lot more than your quote.
Yeah.
Definitely. But you can sometimes do things like you can quote here and then summarize a little bit more and then quote again and then summarize a little bit more. It can be really woven together in ways that you might not initially think. So give me a second to just read this. Okay, so I noticed you've done something really interesting here. You summarized Afzal's viewpoints, and then you immediately went into your I say. You've said that he laments that the nature of grading has been transformed. Then you say, I agree with him that students should not view their grades as final destinations. However, I believe that society relies on grading, that students are unfortunately forced to care about grades. And then you go back into his they say. Afzal himself admits, in my attempt to transform how students approach grading, I realized that I am up against 12 or more years of socialization. And so I think that works because he's almost responding back to what you just said. Like you responded to him, and then you're showing how he's basically saying something about what you just said, which I think really works. But I wondered if you had done any of that for a reason. Like, did you have a thought process about why you brought up your viewpoint so early?
I don't know. I just felt like it was important to like establish that I was qualifying what he was saying early on, so that I don't know, so that it wasn't like just a bunch of they say and then a bunch of I say. I just kind of like mixed it up. It wasn't really conscious, but
I mean, I think it kind of works here because you almost, it's like you want to highlight two different points that he made, and so you're using your I say as kind of a transition between those 2 points, and so I think that works. That works really well. And then you go on after you put in another quote, you respond and say, he's right. For an overwhelming majority of students, society has been pounding the importance of getting good grades from the moment they stepped into elementary school. And then you, although I agree with Afzal that grading should be viewed simply as a tool, his vision seems somewhat idealistic. In modern society, good grades really are the biggest factor. So it seems like you're qualifying him. The only thing that I might be concerned about is, as a reader, it almost feels like you're going back and forth. Yeah. And so while I think to some degree it works, almost because you come back here at the end and you again bring up both viewpoints, I'm wondering if it might be more straightforward if you stuck to one, agreed with it, and then brought up the other, and then disagreed with it. I'm wondering if it might be more streamlined that way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Do you have any other questions?
Just at the very end here, I just added in a little bit of like kind of taking Afzal's viewpoint and relating it to like a wider topic. And I don't know, is that something I should be trying to do with this kind of writing? Because we've done that in writing in the past, but not too much so far with this kind.
I'm going to read it, but my gut is yes.
Okay.
Because that's the point, right? We're taking what this one source is saying about this one topic and applying it to our broader argument. So All right, maybe a little idealized remarks to raise an important point. That's a really good transition, a really effective, like, as a reader, I know you're moving into another idea, raising an important point. The modern education system is attempting to quantify learning, which is the larger issue that is going to be addressed. Now, obviously, this is just a little excerpt. If it were in a paper, you would elaborate on that, but it seems to be going in the right direction.
Okay. And then one last thing, just I've noticed that when I write this kind of like they say, I say way, it feels kind of mechanical, like just quote, response, quote, response. Is that like normal? Would that come across to an audience as like, I don't know, just not really, it doesn't flow well, or?
I think it feels mechanical to you because I think that this type of language is something that comes really natural to you, just knowing what I know about your writing from before. So I get that paying attention to it might seem to be a little bit methodical for you. It definitely doesn't come across that way as a reader. It seems to flow. I can very clearly see whose ideas are whose and where they sit in relation to each other. The one thing that I might suggest is I don't know that it has to be one sentence of summary, one sentence of quote, one sentence of response, one sentence of summary, I mean, you can play with it a little bit as long as you are indeed doing those two things, presenting the they say, presenting the I say. I think there's a way to break out of the mold, but as a reader, it does not sound mechanical at all to me. So maybe your direction maybe not rely so much on the templates on the book, but kind of like write it yourself and notice what language you naturally use that goes to those templates, that does the things that the templates do. That might feel a little bit more natural for you.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.